The royal frame is part of history. Ruining people became an art form inside the Washington, D.C. Beltway. Now I consider it a permanent feature of our news cycle as well. You'll notice that every week the news carries breathless narratives on the latest scandal. But if you wait 3 days or 2 weeks later, it gradually becomes clear that the narrative we're being told is basically false. The relentless pressure is probably what's driving this. The relentless pressure to get people to click on these desperate little news websites. Kind of wonder how profitable they really are, and these people's jobs and maybe the existence of these websites, these organizations, depends on just how many clicks a day they get, or their funding's going to get pulled by their backers. So they're ginning this up. It's driving the feeding frenzy, and that's the only way to describe it. It's a regular feeding frenzy, But the royal frame has long, it has a long history in America. It's going back all the way to the beginning. Um, I used to go to Washington D.C. all the time, and I lived there for a while. And next to the Lincoln Memorial is a monument to the father of the modern Navy, John Erickson. He designed the most famous warship in history, the USS Monitor. Uh, our most famous naval engineer, John Erickson, was nearly destroyed by the royal frame. Before the Civil War in 1844, a cannon exploded on his ship, one of his ships, and killed the Secretary of State and the Secretary of Navy. Oops, the Daily Double. Well, Erickson was not at fault, but he was made the scapegoat by the people who were responsible. And he literally spent years clearing his name and trying to keep his inventions from being stolen. Um, Now, Nikola Tesla, here's another royal frame. He invented the modern age when he perfected and built the first hydroelectric power plant in 1895 in Niagara Falls, and he started the electrification not just of this country but of the world. Thomas Edison, um, the Wizard of Menlo Park, as he was described, stole Tesla's patents, drove him into financial ruin, where Tesla died, broke and forgotten. Yeah, wow. It was only 100 years later that Tesla began to get some credit for his many genius inventions that have, without question, changed the course of the 20th century. And let's see, the USS Indianapolis. It was a disaster in World War II. It was blamed on the captain who committed suicide, but he was exonerated by a schoolboy 56 years later. Okay, the Indianapolis was torpedoed by a Japanese submarine. 900 survivors went into the sea, and 600 of these men died over the next 4 days, many of them killed by sharks. Captain McVeigh was court-martialed, found guilty of failing to zigzag to avoid torpedoes, but new evidence and testimony of survivors reversed this court-martial verdict in 2001. Uh, let's see, the royal frame. The Sam Shepard murder case was the most high-profile case of its kind since the Lindbergh kidnapping. Sam Shepard was a neurosurgeon convicted of the 1954 murder of his wife, and he was later exonerated in 1966 after spending all that time in prison. The handyman who committed the murder had recently worked on his house. The guy had an extensive criminal record, but he was never considered as a suspect. And the police ignored physical evidence and, basically out of envy and jealousy, convicted the husband of the victim. Shepard was a man. He was very successful. He's wealthy. He's a handsome doctor, rich. He's got a beautiful wife. The motivation of envy and jealousy drives many of these royal frames. The most egregious example I can think of was this guy was the most famous male sex symbol in the 1980s, Richard Gere. He's still making movies. A rival actor, jealous of his success, began a rumor involving Richard Gere and a live gerbil supposedly placed in an orifice of his body, this necessitating a visit to the emergency room. Okay, this became an urban legend that everyone repeated. That's how they get started. Not because people believed this, in my mind, if you think about it more about 10 seconds, you realize it's probably physically impossible. Not because people believed it, they repeated it, because it was so outlandish, so over the top, and frankly, so cruel. It amused people, us. I never repeated this to other people, but I would hear it all the time, and I would laugh with everybody else. Ha ha ha. Schadenfreude, I guess. People enjoy this form of urban legend because, the target of this royal frame, they needed to be brought down a peg by people who were jealous of their success, their wealth, their fame, and let's face it, the powerful attraction that they engendered in the opposite sex. Uh, Not uncommon. Now, the pre-internet royal frame of famous men had the elements of male envy, being so over the top as to be unbelievable, and it's got the no other way to say it, the element of deviant sex in there as well. Just a strange little brew. Previously, the royal frame had, it had the motive of covering up crime. Great crimes or shifting blame away from the guilty parties towards someone else, or it was all about smearing people and stealing, these world-changing inventions worth literally trillions of dollars. Now, today, in the era of social media, The royal frame is tied up with identity politics and with this explosive mixture of race and sex. Basically what people argue about and conflict about. Just as a component of being a human being. Um, but we've brought that into politics, which is that is explosive and dangerous, frankly. The Duke Lacrosse rape hoax was a royal frame that destroyed the lives of these accused for years. People just starting out in life. The Rolling Stone rape hoax, demonstrated pretty clearly to anyone who was paying attention how journalism it no longer has a filter. Back when people read newspapers, you go into the newsroom and there's a lot of gray hair in there. I mean, and they had lots of editors, and these were guys, 50s, 60s, or even older, and they had a lot of experience, and they were like the filter, on the people who were writing these stories. The editors, they were really, really rigorous. There was a lot of rigor, bent toward the truth. And if you go into these website newsrooms, I would guess that the average age is probably under 30. Um, they're just out of college. You pay them half the money. There's not nearly as many of them. They fired all of these editors like several decades ago. All the 60-year-olds, all the 50-year-olds. They fired all those people, and now everybody's 27, 24. They're out of school. You don't have to pay them money, and they don't have medical bills, and you can make them work 60 or 80 hours a week. With just dangle the carrot in front of them. So there's no longer journalism no longer has a filter. There's no editors. Now we've seen how conflict sells in reality TV formats. This was beginning probably in the early 90s was the first reality TV shows, and this is like seeped into our culture. Conflict sells, and now it's been applied liberally to the news. The Covington and the Jesse Smollett stories are just the latest installments in the royal frame. Royal frame. These hoaxes they destroy lives, and these modern rural frames, they perpetuate the lie that the United States of America is a racist hellhole. Okay, if you travel anywhere in the world, go to Japan, they're unabashedly, um, and you would call them racist. Go to China, they're racist. Go to the Middle East, they're racist. Anywhere you go, they're not self-conscious about having a preference for their own people. Okay, and all these places I've mentioned are basically racial states. So it seems like the default human condition, frankly, and we're the exception. So we're at the other end of the spectrum from a racist hellhole. But that would, you would have to go to a lot of trouble to figure that out. You actually have to get a passport, get on a plane, and go somewhere for a couple of weeks, for crying out loud. Okay. So finally, since if there is no penalty for those who invent these frames and these hoaxes, about rape and attempted lynchings and all this, all these hoaxes, these are going to continue to do real damage to race relations in this country. They're going to diminish the trust in our society. Societies without trust are not wealthy societies. You go other places in the world where they don't have trust. These places are poor. Um, that term S-hole, hellhole. I mean, a civilization without trust is poverty. It equals poverty. Okay. Now lives will be ruined. If this continues, they're going to continue to do damage to our race relations. They're going to keep driving down the trust in our society. They're ruining people's lives. They're tearing at the fabric of society. And where is the lesson? Um, I'm 50. When I was a kid, my parents hammered into me, the lesson of the boy who cried wolf. What's going to happen, after these thousands of false cries, oh, the fascists, the Nazis are coming to get your children, and what if the beast really does reawaken? I mean, it's inevitable, for the last 100 years, it's just going around and around, back and forth between, Marxism and fascism, um, and the press will cry wolf. What if no one heeds their call? What if they lose credibility after a thousand iterations of this? The public no longer believes them. What if it really does rear its ugly head? No one's going to come to their rescue, our rescue. So this is dangerous. Okay. Now I've called out some very powerful people trying to stop the crime of the century. I can only expect to get hit with the kind of blow that knocks out even the hardest targets. High profile targets. What they refer to in the business as a kill shot. Uh, it is going to result in some serious humiliation and possibly even destruction. Not to be too melodramatic, but I mean, when you get destroyed utterly and completely, it's basically it's a forced suicide. We've seen these go down. Okay. Now, first I expect to be attacked and my reputation and my good name destroyed. Then they will ruin me financially. They kind of take you apart step by step. And then finally, well, then they will attack my spiritual body. So, they ruin your good name, your reputation, your sacred honor. Then they ruin you financially. They destroy your ability to put a roof over your head and, food in your belly. And then they attack your spiritual body, your soul, the part of you that's made up of hopes and dreams and love. And finally, after they just grind you down, then they destroy your physical body. I assume my physical body, the vessel that keeps you and me on this earth. It's a multi-step process, but Uh, it doesn't take as long as you might imagine sometimes. These people, it's an art form. The royal frame is an art form. Now, the media is exerting a powerful influence, and they understand exactly how this process works, this influencing of society, of your life, of my life, and they know how to manipulate the public using the power of advertising. You know, they can now control public opinion. The Noam Chomsky kind of thing. You may think that you're immune to these effects. I certainly imagine that I'm immune to this manipulation. It's a very human thing to imagine that we're immune, but we are not immune. I'm not immune. You're not immune. If you give a questionnaire to two groups of people in an experiment, to see how you can influence people, and one group, say Group A, gets a questionnaire with words, keywords embedded in the questionnaire, words like weary and tired and frail and elderly, and aged, these, it's kind of like doped with these terms. Then when Group A, they finish the questionnaire, and then you direct them to go down the hall to the next room, you know, between the two groups, Group A, they walk much slower, 30, 50% slower sometimes, certainly 30% slower. They're unsteady on their feet, they wobble. Some of them, they drag their feet, they tend to drag their feet, or some of them even drag their leg behind them somewhat without even realizing it. Compared to the other group, you're having real gross effects. Group A has internalized these terms, and they now exhibit aspects of aging. You're being influenced unconsciously. It's the human condition. We imagine ourselves to be immune to this kind of thing. Nothing could be farther from the truth. 100 years ago, they've perfected this a long time ago. They've been doing this advertising, if you want to can't call it that, influencing. They perfected this 100 years ago, and they've been practicing it for 100 years. So as the years go by, it becomes more and more refined. Now, 100 years ago, women staged a protest marches, to get out the vote, to get their right to vote. And they're trying to win the vote. Okay, so advertisers had a group of women, paid employees, go to the front of this march and begin to all smoke cigarettes as an act of defiance, and such that smoking became synonymous with women's rights and the image of an independent-minded woman. Okay, so advertisers, influencers figured this out over 100 years ago. Now they've perfected the art form. Today our opinions are given to us depending upon which news source we follow, either on the left or on the right. We may deny it. I deny it. You deny it. Sure, okay. But just ask, go up to someone, preferably not a loved one or a friend, go up to someone and ask their opinions. I'm sure they'll be glad to give them to you. And they immediately spout the narrative of their chosen media outlets as if these were their core principles and their core beliefs and their core values. But these core beliefs, they're exactly mirroring, excuse me, the talking points that we have been allotted, given by the media. Whichever side of the divide we stake out, if you go to somebody on the right, they start, their core beliefs, well, gee, that sounds exactly like the talking points on that channel that you watch. And go to somebody on the left, same effect, okay? They're parroting what, they have been given their opinions, and they consider these, their sacred core beliefs. Well, we're being influenced. I'm sorry, but that's just the truth. Don't take my word for it. Call up the junior college, call up a university, email some people, ask the experts. Ask somebody with a PhD in this stuff who understands this stuff, uh, economics, marketing, psychology. Go ask an expert. They will validate, they will verify exactly what I'm telling you. Okay. Now the media can use, in terms of the royal frame, the media can use video to skillfully edit, tapes of an interview or just tapes in general to take your words out of context and to make you appear in the worst light imaginable. By just taking your words out of context, out of frame, changes the meaning of what you're saying to basically any kind of meaning they want to impugn to you that was not your original meaning. A little seamless cut and pasting, and you could be turned, I could be turned into a monster of epic proportions in the light of the world without knowing you as a friend, a neighbor, or family member. You might assume that, this person is awful. The world of deep fakes in the royal frame. Deep fakes now make it possible to digitally put your face in any existing video, like the tail wagging the dog, okay? Now, I'm taking on some of the most powerful people in the world, and I feel like I'm waiting for the axe to fall with, the proverbial 10-ton giant boulder weight hanging above my head, waiting to come crashing down, Now, should any of us, you or me or anyone, have the unmitigated gall to challenge the status quo, the power elite, we would find ourselves in a similar position, which begs the question, after they destroy me, who's next after me? You know, I'm sure you feel it's very unlikely, but it could be you, it could be a friend of yours, it could be your kids, Anyone who challenges the status quo is liable to be a recipient of the royal frame. Okay, I have a plan to reform our system of government and stop this recurring criminality. I want to save capitalism. I want to save the republic from this creeping corrupt oligarchy, the rule of the elite, the power elite. But frankly, I fear that before you can even achieve enough momentum to start some kind of bottom-up reform movement, the media, they are going to crush you. Okay, now they're going to make an example of me, but who are they going to make an example of next? This may in fact not be just my last chance. This might be the last chance of our republic. Not to be too melodramatic about it, but you know, nation states and the world in flux. It's kind of like a chess game. If you've ever played chess, you can make, you're playing somebody good, and you can make one mistake and lose a pawn. You can make two mistakes, and if you're really good, you can come back. After being down 1 or 2 or 4 points. But if you make like two or three or more mistakes, it doesn't really matter how good you are at some point. You know, this is an unforgiving world, and the republic. It's not set in stone that this republic, the United States of America, has to endure forever. Okay, so this may not be just my last chance. We will only be able to tell in hindsight. Maybe this is our last chance. My head's on the chopping block, and I'm going to be waiting for. I am waiting for the axe to fall. Okay, so here we are. We're at a crossroads in the history of this nation. And everything's in flux. They're probably going to take me out. I mean, I can go toe to toe with people, but you can't fight the media. So I'm probably going to be destroyed. Now, the question you have to ask is, do you save yourself, by hiding from the Leviathan? We all kind of scurry out of the way as the giant, monster comes, bottom feeding along, just to avoid getting sucked up into the never-ending, maw of destruction. The Leviathan comes in for the kill. Do you get out of the way? Seems like perfectly common sense, at this point. Do you follow me? Follow me to victory, or perhaps follow me, into the belly of this beast, into the darkness. These are rational questions. Will I win or will I lose is the question that decides. If you believe it's possible to do the impossible. Now, a republic, or just like this situation itself, but a republic is like Tinkerbell. If people stop believing, the republic dies. Okay, um, Tinkerbell will live and she will triumph over evil as long as people believe. All right, but when we stop believing in the republic, republics are incredibly robust. But once the core belief system, the mission statement, the basic level programming is corrupted, it's only a matter of time. And republics are paradoxically, they don't last very long, and they're vulnerable from sabotage from the inside. Okay, now it's a paradox of all the slave revolts in history. Do we get out of the way and not get trampled underfoot by the Leviathan? Do we join the resistance and perhaps win or perhaps be crushed? Well, is Tinkerbell going to win or is Tinkerbell going to lose? That's the question that decides your answer. Of course, it's only rationality. Let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Now, you know, uh, divide and conquer. The paradox of all slave results. Divide and conquer, we lose. Unite and fight, we win. Frankly, I'm not afraid anymore. I've been through a lot in life, and I don't really get embarrassed or ashamed. And I've been through a lot of pain, a lot of humiliation, a lot of embarrassment already. A lot of life. After you've been on the earth a few decades, life throws a lot at you. So if you survive it, you generally get pretty thick skin. I got nothing to lose. That's a very liberating feeling to have nothing to lose. When you got nothing, as the poets tells us, you got nothing to lose. And so, strap yourself in. They have the media. What have you got? Well, you got nothing to lose. They have the media, they have the money, they have all the gold, they have all the guns. What do we got? Well, we have the numbers. We are the people. We're the working class. We're the middle class that's getting crushed by this oligarchy. I mean, our people are dying off in huge numbers, not seen since the plague of AIDS or the collapse of the Soviet Union. This is an epic moment in history that they're not telling us about. The people of this country are in the midst of a mass die-off. And you know what? These people are okay with that. And if you don't fight back, uh, you are going to go quietly into that cold, dark night, my friend. But I am not going quietly into that cold, dark night because we have the numbers, we have right on our side, and right makes might. Okay, well, they're corrupted. We have our immortal souls. We have God because we're in the right. And these people, they've got their gold and they've got their guns, they've got the media, they got the money, but frankly, they've lost their souls. Okay, now we will win in the end. It's only a question of when. Time. Okay, now or in 50 years? Well, why not now? Why wait 50 years to win? All right. All right, the royal frame. Now, in cases of libel, slander, and invasion of privacy, a public figure cannot succeed in a lawsuit on, incorrect, harmful statements in the United States unless there's proof that the writer or publisher acted with actual malice by knowing the falsity or reckless disregard for the truth. They purposely lied to destroy you. In other words, the publisher, as a public person. The legal burden of proof in defamation cases actions is thus higher in the case of a public figure than in the case of an ordinary person. So, you know, we prize above all else freedom of speech and the power of the pen, the power of the press. Well, it's being used by the oligarchy, the all-powerful elite, to destroy people and to protect the corrupt system as it exists. Their jealous parochial interests that are in essence causing the great die-off. Okay, so ordinary persons used to have real protection under law from being attacked in the media and being defamed and harmed. We can no longer count on the rule of law. Okay, this thing has gone off the rails. So there is no longer any legal protection, public person or private person like you or myself. Now I'm an ordinary person. I have no fame, fortune, retinue of fans, to defend me. No personal lawyers, no fabulous wealth to hide behind. I can't dodge the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, so to speak. But I'm not afraid to mix it up with these people and go toe to toe. With people over things I believe in. But this is something completely different we're talking about here. Trying to go up against a hostile media is impossible. No matter what, you will fail. Okay, I cannot. No one can defend themselves against the kind of charges that I expect to face. They have the media. Well, I don't have my own TV channel. I don't have the weight of the press behind me. I can't defend myself against the Leviathan. You cannot, by definition, prove a negative. For instance, you cannot prove that Santa Claus does not exist. Prove that Santa Claus does not exist. What? It's impossible. Prove that you are not a criminal. What? It's impossible. The burden of proof is on the person who asserts that there is a Santa Claus. You have to prove the positive. You cannot prove a negative. By definition, this is logic. It's math. 2 plus 2 equals 4. That's truth. Okay. You cannot prove, by definition, you cannot prove a negative. It cannot be otherwise. Yet we are expected, it is demanded to prove the negative, and we are judged harshly otherwise. Well, you must be guilty if you can't prove, that you're not a criminal. It is a no-win situation for people who are accused in this manner. So, I tried to keep it light, but let's get serious for a minute. To injure and abuse a weaker person, a woman, a child, these are shocking crimes, and when it comes to rape and murder thereof, this rises to a crime that shocks the conscience and historically has deserved the highest ultimate penalty that we can deliver. Okay, in Western civilization, crimes against women and children have always been judged in a harsher light compared to other parts of the world. Um, it's just been our priority. Now, I personally have insight into the toll on society and the victims. My mother's mother, my grandmother, was the victim of physical and sexual abuse as a child, and though she lived to be 90 years old, the pain that she carried never entirely left her. I realized in my early 20s that when an adult sexually assaults a child, just looking at my grandmother, that person, that adult, they are committing a crime worse than murder because they are destroying a human soul. Okay, they are condemning a child to a life of emotional, psychological pain that never entirely ends. The suffering of the victim doesn't just stop there with them. It affects their family. It affects follow-on generations. Okay, I've seen this played out in my own family. All right, now my mom worked at the National College of District Attorneys, and she invented the way of teaching prosecutors. It was her job to go around the country and teach prosecuting attorneys how to prosecute sex crimes perpetrated against children. Now, I was too young to be involved in the curriculum, or the subject matter, but I absorbed, her dedication to protect the most vulnerable in our society, the most vulnerable individuals in our midst. These types of crime are very difficult to prove, and more often than not, historically, they go unpunished. The people who do these kinds of crimes, they're only sorry that they got caught. Don't confuse these people with a normal psychology, a normal person. These people feel no empathy. These people feel no sympathy for the victim. And nearly 70% of these criminals will go on to repeat the crime even after they are caught. Even with all the tools of intervention of experts of psychology and psychiatry and pharmacology and all the ologies, okay, even without all the tools in hand in a modern society, only about 15% of these people will willingly cease their pathological predatory practices of stalking and violating small children. We're talking about prepubescent small children. They're incredibly vulnerable, and these people have a genius for doing these kinds of crimes. They're sociopaths. They know how to manipulate people. They manipulate institutions. They manipulate parents and family to get at the victim. Okay? These people cannot be allowed to walk among us. So, what do? These people should be allowed to turn themselves in and live in low security facilities that are basically pleasant places. These are self-supporting. You work, you earn money. It's a going concern. Whether you grow your own food or you support the institution other ways, they should be relatively self-supporting, pleasant, like country club prisons for these people. Okay, specialized institutions. Now, I understand, stay with me. People are going to object, oh, but, listen, the idea is to have these individuals willingly announce, if you will, their unnatural attractions and practices, and to willingly, of their own free will, relocate before they commit depredations upon children. Before, not after. Now, there is no perfect solution to this, I understand, okay? But this idea, this concept is preferable to a criminal who offends, and then to brutal and often brief temporary incarceration after they have damaged multiple innocents, only to then be released again, as is the process, on an unsuspecting public who has no idea who and what they are dealing with. Okay, we should not release these people to almost certainly reoffend again in the exact same manner. Um, they should be allowed to live their lives pleasantly and comfortably in a controlled environment that isn't freedom and it isn't, brutal prison. It's kind of, uh, well, it's an institution away from the most vulnerable among us. Now, me personally, okay, that's our teachable moment. Um, I've never robbed anyone. Okay, I've never raped anyone. I've never murdered anyone. I'm not a con man. I'm not a liar. I have no history of preying on women or children. I've never struck a woman, much less harmed a child. I have, through my life, maintained stable, long-term relationships with adult females. I'm not one of these people, one of these monsters that walks among us. Okay. Uh, Now, in the past, when I've seen other people, be accused of these kinds of crimes, I've been suspicious of them just because they're being accused. Well, why are they accusing you? I was suspicious. Okay, I cannot expect, but expect for other people to have the same reaction, that I had. Okay, I would be suspicious too, but I cannot prove a negative. I can't prove that Santa Claus doesn't exist. It's impossible. I'm going to do what I can do. I can proclaim loudly that anywhere, anytime, I will do the only thing I can. I'll show a history that I can prove of never having any kind of these deviant behaviors or even criminal or violent behaviors, period. I will take a lie detector test to prove I'm not a person with unnatural attractions, that I have never struck a woman, nor as an adult have I ever transgressed or interacted with a child in any way. Um, you know, my personal history, these are facts. I worked at NASA for years, and I became an ESL teacher for several years. Later, I studied microbiology. I did important work in antibiotic resistance. After 9/11, I worked in biodefense with some very, big names with 25 years experience, behind them. Very accomplished people. I've been in some very, uh, famous labs. I focus my life and my energy helping human beings. Okay, making the world a better place. Now, hopefully, maybe you can put yourself in my place and uh, let the legal process play out. Maybe you're one of those people that likes to pile on when somebody's down. That seems to be the modus operandi these days. Just a mob on social media. People like to act out. You give them the cloak of anonymity, and people say anything. And people feel empowered. Like some kind of lynch mob to just destroy people. To basically, if you take away somebody's ability to feed themselves and clothe themselves and put a roof over their head, it's basically an invitation to commit suicide. It's an invitation to die. So people like to act out, but let's be clear. These people aren't. They've appointed themselves judge, jury, and executioner, and these people are no better than lynch mob from 100 years ago. Frankly, if they're trying to if they're trying to bring about a forced suicide, they're basically a lynch mob. Um, but I have a track record. I've walked the walk, not just talk the talk. I focus my life and my energy into helping human beings, into making the world a better place. And I can prove it. And I can prove through my where I lived. I've lived and worked in minority neighborhoods and places where I was the minority, and I can prove this. This isn't just blather. Okay, so hopefully you can put yourself in my place, let the legal process play out. If you doubt me, challenge me, hook me up to the machine, test me, make me prove that I am willing to do what I said I will do. Okay, challenge me, put me to the test. Now, in the Middle Ages, there was a trial by ordeal. A knight would get accused of crime, and so he would put his hand in the fire, and if he died of an infection, well, he was lying, and if he survives, he told, oh, I guess he's telling the truth. Or trial by combat, 1,000 years ago, you'd fight the giant from Game of Thrones, and if he kills you, oh, I guess you're lying. And if you win, well, you were obviously telling the truth. Okay, we don't have that anymore. But now we have a machine, lie detector. Okay, good. Test me anytime, test me anywhere. For now, that's all I can do. And this narrative is gonna play out like so many other narratives, royal frames we've seen before. And it will eventually resolve itself into the truth. Okay, but if we have seen, this history of these royal frames, this takes time. Okay, it doesn't happen. The truth doesn't come out overnight. And until then, keep the faith. Okay, and in the words of the poet, God bless the beasts and children. Amen.